Hey, I'm Chris McKee. You might have heard me this past season doing play-by-play for a handful of games for the Canadian Premier League. So I wanted to chime in on the growth of the CPL, which has been way too slow, in my opinion, over the past couple of years. They did add Atletico Ottawa in 2020 and then Vancouver FC last year. Really good, but not good enough. I'm also hearing some of the rumored places for expansion coming for 2025 that are completely ridiculous, including Quebec City and going back to Edmonton, where they once had a team and it folded because it didn't work. Now, my history and background is a little different than most sports broadcasters because for over 20 years before I got into sports media, I was an award-winning music agent and concert promoter who has booked concerts and festivals in just about every single city in Canada, big or small. I've produced and sold tickets for literally thousands of concerts across Canada. So I've got a better understanding of how to sell out venues than maybe most people do. So the idea of the CPL expanding to Quebec City is absolutely laughable. You ask any concert promoter or agent in Canada who will tell you Quebec City is a horrible idea to try to get any consistency in selling tickets in that market. So, for example, any band I would book a show in Montreal for like 20, 25 grand a night, we'd have to do the gig in Quebec City the next night for about 7,500 because they simply don't have the audience or population to pay what other cities can. The CPL will fail if they go to Quebec City. Write it down. So, as far as going back to Edmonton, it's the same thing as drinking spoiled milk, putting it back in the fridge for a few days and hoping it tastes better. Don't do it. It doesn't work. Learn your lesson and move on with life. Don't go back to Edmonton. So here are the cities that the Canadian Premier League needs to look at for expansion, in my opinion. Number one, Toronto. I know York United plays up at York University, but there needs to be a team in downtown Toronto or in the city of Toronto. York U's way up in the middle of nowhere at Jane and Shoreham, which is literally one of the most dangerous areas anywhere in Canada. The locals call Shoreham Shore Shot. Because if you're on Shoreham after dark, you're sure to get shot. Like you can't take the wife or kids up there or, go for pregame drinks or dinner anywhere in that area because literally it's too dangerous. They got to get out of there and get in downtown Toronto. Also, I don't care about the argument of MLS being in Toronto with TFC. The CPL is a different league. If your business model is to be scared of major cities because of another competitor, your business model will fail sooner than later. Toronto's the most populated city in Canada. Put a team there. So imagine if Taylor Swift or Drake did a concert tour across Canada, but didn't have a Toronto date. It's ridiculous, right? So stop playing scared. Get a team in downtown Toronto first and foremost. Number two place for expansion, in my opinion, Oshawa, Ontario. With the massive influx of immigration in Canada, the suburbs of Toronto are growing at an exponential rate. Go look at the housing and rental market in Southern Ontario. It's insane. The almost 2 million new immigrants and students who arrive in Canada each year aren't moving to Quebec City or Sault Ste. Marie or Brandon, Manitoba. The majority are moving to the GTA and, of course, Vancouver. So did you know the Oshawa Generals OHL team has averaged over 5,000 fans per game for over a decade, which shows the area can support something similar over the summer months. I've been to a bunch of Generals games. Great vibe, great energy, packed house. They've got a stadium in Oshawa called the Oshawa Civic. Might need a bit of money, but it will work if you put a CPL team in Oshawa. Number three, speaking of growth in Southern Ontario, the next place the CPL should look at is either Guelph or Kitchener-Waterloo. They both have very nice stadiums at their universities and are two cities with booming populations and housing growth. I talked about that, all the new immigrants coming in, a lot heading out that way to Guelph and KW. They've got those stadiums there. More teams in Southern Ontario also creates rivalry. You guys do realize the likes of Liverpool, Everton, Manchester United, and Man City, all four teams are less than a 40-minute drive from each other. Any of those clubs seem to struggle financially? I mean, I'll set aside the Everton thing. For the most part, they've done well over the past 100 years. Rivalry is good and also will create lesser travel costs and hotel costs for the league if more teams were closer. For the sake of a new TV deal, having teams within driving distance of Toronto will make production and the production cost of games stay down. You got to think about that, right? And then finally, the last place I think the CPL should look to for expansion, they've done really well out in BC with Pacific FC on the island and now Vancouver on the mainland. So for the sake of travel and building new rivalry, add another team in the interior of BC in either Kelowna or Kamloops. Again, both booming cities will do well out there year round. It's more of a soccer atmosphere out in BC, so I think it will do well. Again, Not only am I a CPL broadcaster, I've also been an agent who produces major concert tours across Canada. So I understand travel and hotel costs for large groups and the logistics behind that, as well as selling tickets in every one of these cities we've talked about. The atmosphere in these smaller stadiums, like the Starlight Stadium out in Langford, BC, where Pacific plays, and in Halifax, where the Wanderers play, and as well as Cavalry Stadium, all outstanding venues and great football atmospheres. That's what the CPL needs to be looking at. Playing these games in massive CFL stadiums like they do in Winnipeg, Ottawa, and Hamilton is absolute nonsense. It looks horrible with 30,000 empty seats and no vibe. It's also not cool. You have to make it cool, make it a vibe, and people will come. I'm Chris McKee. Drop me a follow on Twitter at Mr. McKee, and also leave a comment in the YouTube section. I'm sure there's going to be plenty of them.